We're starting now. Okay, so welcome to I think it's the second Outside Salon. The first one we did it with New Age Launch in collaboration with Tosca Tehran in her studio. It was about all about mushrooms and other things. So this is the first official one here in at the Fields Institute. Next week we have another one, but it's not going to be at the Fields Institute. It's going to be at Lenox Hall as part of a scientific conference called Genedis. So I should say a few words about it. This event from today and the event from next week on the 27th are somehow combined. I'm actually very proud to start this because people don't really do it too much in science, and what I'm referring to is we are starting to do some explorations about sex, sexuality, sexual reproduction, and pornography in the sciences and also in new media. This is a sort of taboo topic, which I really would like to explore also as part of the Outside Salon as a combination between art and science. So in order to do this, we took as a starting point an invitation that we got from the Genedis conference, which is going to take place here with Laurier and Lenox Hall on the 26th, 27th, and 28th. And I was asked to create a panel that had some artists who were exploring ideas about gene editing. However, when you're talking about gene editing, you're also you're thinking about ethics, you're thinking about future, etc., etc. But you're not really thinking, like, people are not thinking about the problems that we have right now that need to be solved. And one of the things that need to be solved is the whole issue about sexism, sexuality, sexual reproduction. And the question was, how can we address this in the relationship between art and science? And the two people that will be presenting today, Susanna Pazzonen and Teresa Ascencao, did I pronounce it well? They have developed their research thinking about that and other things, I guess. Yeah, this is the reason why I invited them. I would like to start this by also saying that this Outside Salon today is also a Laser Toronto event. Laser Toronto is part of the Leonardo Network, and Leonardo Network has developed this very long, very big network around the world. Right now we have a lot of events happening in the United States, the Bay Area where it is based, and in other places. 3 locations, I think, in Canada. I think it's somewhere in Alberta. I think it's Calgary, Toronto, and Montreal. And in Europe, London, I think I don't remember anymore. Anyway, so it's around the world. And also right now also in Asia. So I would like to invite Nina to say a few words about the Laser Network.
Everybody, welcome to yet another exciting Leonardo Laser event. And just to Roberta's words, so indeed the network started in the US, mostly in California on the west side of the US, and about 2 years I mean, we started about 4 years ago, but suddenly about 2 years ago, the laser network has exploded. And today we have it in in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro, you name it. So it is really now getting bigger and bigger. And I am especially happy that it is exploding internationally, and that in many places and in many we have the laser events. What I also like about the laser events is that each and every node is individual, developed individually. So, for example, we with Roberta and in Montreal with Giselle Trudel, we are all very interested in thematic events. It's a different way how they approach it. And that's basically all I would like to say. I am very happy that you came, and in case you have any questions, you can always ask later. Thank you so much.
I would like to invite Susanna here. Welcome, Susanna.
Thank you.
Trip.
That's why I came here. Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me? Yeah. Good. So I'm Susanna Paasonen. I'm professor of media studies at University of Turku in Finland. No, I can't see anything. That's too much. Let's not have a nap yet. It's been a kind of a long day. So I'll be talking around a book I just sort of finished on the notion of more than human sex. The book itself, actually, it's on sexual pleasure and play, sex and play. But I started sort of thinking about a few months ago of this kind of recurrence with which there are these news items, kind of clickbaity news items that are always kind of clickbaity news items on sex tend to be worried. There's always a concern about more than human sex. When sex and technology come together, it's usually a cause of concern of some sort. And there are multiple ways in which that happens, but I'll just mention a couple. So, for example, the expansive use of online pornography, and I've been studying online pornography for longer than I care to admit, but basically the idea that the uses of online porn for the purposes of masturbation basically lead to a miserable sex life. They lead to couples not having sex with one another, and in somebody's imagination, this sort of means that procreation of the species is at risk, as if that's the purpose of kind of leisurely sexuality in general. But this kind of constant concern over what internet porn is doing to people's fantasy lives, it's flattening things out, it's commercializing things, it's killing desire, blah, blah, blah. There's also concern recently over the markets for increasingly lifelike interactive sex dolls and robots. And thinking of the future of sex, this is kind of one topic that is sort of abounding as a cause of concern. So for some people who are concerned, and many are concerned, this has to do with reproductive purposes, the future of the species, with this kind of fantasy that the humankind will sort of perish without heterosexual intercourse, contra the, in fact, steady, constant population growth that we are facing. But it's also connected to more kind of moral concerns, according to which the proper side of sex is that of reproductive, straight, monogamous coupling. Needless to say, this indicates a rather narrow understanding of what sex is, what it might be, what it could be. If one considers sex as realms and practices of pleasure, as I tend to, things sort of look different. But there's a lot of this concern happening over morality, over value, over humanity. One routinely voiced concern connected to sex dolls and sex robots are focused on the assumed dehumanization of women in the guise of sex dolls, as well as the erosion of human intimacy and sex that is seen to follow from people having sex with dolls. So it's all those dolls, all that porn, all that masturbation, basically, or masturbation with a doll. So if, say, a person wants to have sex with a doll marked as female, this would, according to this line of reasoning, mean that they are likely to treat women as such objects of pleasure, or that they would at least wish for women to occupy such a role, kind of instrumental role, as an instrument of male pleasure. That a person might want to have sex with a doll for the very virtue of the object being a doll rather than a woman is more seldom discussed, as is the option that people may move between having sex with dolls, people, their own hands, and with all different kinds of people and dolls in various combinations, without conflating them or establishing similar bonds or sexual dynamics within them or between them. So that these objects might not be mutually exclusive, they might exist in this kind of realm of pleasure and play. So further, if one prefers sexual gratification gains from masturbating to porn, as some people I've heard do, this does not necessarily mean that one's sex life is poorer or flatter, or that such pleasures exclude other kinds of exploration, unfolding with partners of flesh, blood, or mucus. Panics or alarmed outcries connected to the centrality of non-human actors in scenes of sexual play speak of norms where sexuality is seen as the specific thing that human bodies do in their mutual connections, and that it's organic in the forms that it takes. This again doesn't necessarily correspond with what people do in their sexual scenes or what drives their fantasy life, so I don't think it's really very helpful. Following this line of argumentation that I've broadly sketched out here, non-human actors in scenes of sex lead to flattened affect or even to the lack thereof. So it's a scene of kind of dehumanized sex void of affect or involving very flat affect. Taking a different route to thinking about this, I'm interested in the intermeshing of human and non-human actors in sexual fantasies, arousals, and pleasures. By proposing that affective intensities bound human and non-human bodies together and animate one another, or that affective intensities animate both human and non-human bodies, I propose understanding sex as a realm of experimentation and play geared towards pleasure, where object worlds are active actors in circuits of corporeal excitement. And I am now blocking my book, which has a very beautiful cover. It's officially coming out. Well, it's out now, but I have a book launch on Monday in London, should you be around. It's been a pet project of mine for the past couple of years. So it basically looks at how applications of theories of play in studies of sex, what might follow from that kind of combination, how we might frame sex differently if we consider it as a practice of play geared towards the pursuit of pleasure. Considered as experimentations with the capacities and sensations of bodies, sex is a means of building affective associations that can be connected to or disconnected from emotional ties and extended intimacies. At the same time, it should be emphasized that these affective associations do not emerge within human interactions alone. Sexual fantasies both open up towards the world and work inwards within bodies as kind of resonant connections. Autoerotic play, fueled by fantasy, for example, is not necessarily solitary, inasmuch as inhabited by non-human actors of all kinds, human ones too, but let's say there might also be sex toys, other paraphernalia, erotic literature, or the abundantly available scenarios harvested from online pornography. And then these different kinds of non-human actors of porn, themselves resulting from complex networks of performers, producers, distributors, cameras, software, hardware, server farms, bodies of flesh, as well as those of silicone, plastic, and metal, as in the gear that is involved. In these kinds of circuits of play that masturbation might involve, affective rebirths cut through human and non-human actors that can occupy equally central roles in this kind of mise-en-scène of desire. So I'm not dissing the non-human here. But thinking slightly differently about these kind of circuits of non-human, more than human sex, I would actually like to spend a little time talking about paraphernalia, because I've been interested in it recently. So thinking of, for example, dressing up in something, in a sexual way. So some accessories adorn the body in ways that accentuate its characteristic features, while others erode personal traits, and yet others assemble them in novel ways. And here's a collection of things for us to look at. Uniforms and costumes are broadly used to indicate status, skill, desired roles, and acts within play, as well as to locate the play participants in relation to one another. So uniforms are kind of clear in a sense. Costume allows for people to be subsumed by their roles and their respective, regularly polarized positions of power within the play scene, so that dressing up can be a means to indicate dominant or submissive positions, to arouse one's partners, or to experience more solitary thrills. You don't necessarily need a partner to be turned on. So just on the top there, those are pictures that Sergio Messina harvested from amateur porn enthusiasts or fetish enthusiasts on Usenet. So a lot of kind of play with gloves, fondness for particular socks. The gentleman who looks maybe like a terrorist actually has a thing for corduroy. So his idea of kind of sexy dressing is velvety things, pockets and things. The other things maybe are more clear what they indicate. The props involved in play, from sexy underwear to more specific gear, as displayed in some of this, are nevertheless not mere communication devices or instruments for attracting, let's say, attention. Following Maurizio Bosagli's discussion of materiality, such props can be seen as torn between competing forces, animated by a traffic between meaning and libidinal volatility. In other words, the object world connected to and integrated in sexual play is an active element, agent in networks of actors that comprises the scene of desire and its circuits of bodily excitement that is sort of the forwards or that emerge from this scene. Props and fetishes function as objects of sexual desire and fantasy, animated by these affective intensities that get attached to them. They animate people in return through what Bosagli identifies as a complex and energetic charge to act on the matter that is subjectivity itself. And here my work is very clearly connected to that of Jenny Sundén, sitting there on her work on the vibrant matter and vibrator technologies, among other things. In her study of San Francisco BDSM culture, Margaret Weiss conceptualizes kink, paraphernalia, as technological prostheses allowing for transformations in the forms of embodiment and bodily technique. For her, these produce a body in play, a body that is simultaneously divided into parts and extended through objects, both produced and transformed through consumption. So the way that Weiss discusses paraphernalia, it reorganizes bodily zones, bodily contours and extensions, as well as the capacities of what these bodies can do and sense in accordance with the object's surface field, material density, flexibility, and impact. So different forms of gear can constrain you. They can provide kind of different limitations to how you sense, or then they can amplify sensation. Kind of varies. The tactile capacities of toys, for example, craft out, expand, and reconfigure connections and exchanges between human and non-human bodies, and make novel sensations and relations possible. As Weiss points out, SM toys are carefully designed to amplify, prolong, or expand bodily sensations. Toys are catalogued as stingy, not stingy, thuddy, sharp, soft, cutting, surface, deep, intense. In the case of fetishes, seeing, caressing, smelling, or getting dressed in one's particular inanimate object of attraction effectively reattunes the body by moving it from one state to another in immediate and possibly very forceful ways. So just getting dressed in something can be the pleasure. It can be the scene of pleasure itself. Such objects prime and cue the body for sexual play, much like seeing and touching, let's say, a human partner might, which basically means that a categorical distinction drawn between human and non-human here wouldn't really be it wouldn't make really sense. It wouldn't be the central division necessary to draw. The complex sexual dynamics revolving around an object of desire, whether it's human or not, are both affective and cognitive, and magnetic in the force within which it impresses itself on those properly attuned. Considering sexual desire as intensity emerging in connection and contact with bodies makes it possible to expand the scene of sex to non-human actors, and in doing so to rethink their role less as that which somehow soils or skews the scene of sex, as in the examples I started out from, in the porn destroying sexual lives, or in dolls basically destroying intimacy or gender equality or any other thing. Because this kind of idea of scene assumes that the scene of sex is organic, natural, or human. So thinking about non-human agency in the realm of sex makes it possible to see all kinds of props, toys, as elements in a constantly evolving scene that comprises a person's sexual life, its desires, fantasies, pleasures, attachments, and sensations, and then this scene would not be just kind of human. So my interest, as it might be clear at this point, isn't so much on kind of the future of the species, on kind of sex in the sense of reproducing it. I'm very interested in sex as a practice of pleasure. And while this seems like an obvious connection to make, I've been reading lots of sexological literature in the past couple of years. And in one book that's maybe 10 years old, it was heralded as kind of a brave breakthrough in the argument that it proposes that sexuality might be about pleasure and not just reproduction. So there seems to be this kind of lack of attention in all kinds of literature, in kind of sexual research, to sort of take pleasure seriously as a central thing, and also as a thing that might be very complex to look at. And it's been very educational going through the literature that I've been able to find on sexuality and play, because there isn't really much outside, let's say, BDSM studies. There are studies of sexual play among different kinds of animals, squirrels, birds, sheep, as part of this kind of mating ritual that then, leads to reproduction. So the whole kind of way in which the scene of sexual play gets imagined tends to be rather narrow. And pleasure, the fact that this activity might be an end in itself, kind of autotelic practice of pleasure, as in definitions of play, it really doesn't get foregrounded so much. But I'm going to leave you with these beautiful images, and we're going to move to something completely different. Thank you. Yes, that is my desktop image.
Okay, so while we are doing a little bit of setup, there's a setup. How about you have some questions for Susanna? Yes. Thanks, Susanna. More of the do you use any particular theories of play, or do you go to any particular definition of play? Could you narrow that down for us?
Yes, in most theories of play, sex is that which marks the boundaries of play, that which isn't play. Most classic, from Heisinger to anyone really, sex only enters the play when it's about sort of non-normative, kind of really kinky stuff that's like out there. It's sort of in most theories. So I was very interested in Michael Sicard's definition of play in Play Matters, which is a fairly new book from MIT. And he writes about play as a practice that is not necessarily fun, but pleasure. And that play can be pleasure can be fun. It can also be sort of dark and be pleasurable. When they are hurtful, they can be pleasurable.
I'm just getting my screen up because I have to, whoops, sorry. Oh, what did it have shown on the other side if I don't do this? I guess it doesn't matter, right? It wasn't doing it? Should I just cancel this? Okay. If there's anything you think I should change, let me know. I've just taken it off and it's not fixing it anymore. So I want to thank Roberta for inviting me, and I very much resonated with Susanna's presentation. Also, thanks Stephen and the Fields Institute. I am not going to do so much, I'm not as strong in the academia, more in the arts, although I did do an MFA. I'm more comfortable talking from the core, and because that's what motivates my art creation. So I just want to draw on especially one artwork today called Her Pleasure, Her Desire Remix, which is actually about sex and technology. I found that maybe we can have a dialogue together since Susanna presented on the concerns around sex and technology. I'm very curious as a sex-positive feminist if it's possible to use technology to actually find what people who identify as women, what our desire is and what our pleasure is, including through social media. So, but I have also been, I have watched porn myself, full disclosure. A lot of the porn online, as Susanna has mentioned, it's for heterosexual males, but there is stuff out there that is beyond that, and it is more diverse, and a lot of people are calling it feminist porn. We're lucky to live in Toronto, where we have the Feminist Porn Festival every year, the awards, and they've taken away the word feminist now because it seems to, for a lot of people, narrow it too much. So this piece here was in reaction to watching pornography online for pleasure for myself, because I'm on a journey to discover what my desires are and what my pleasure is. I find there's a lot more out there for heterosexual men and very little for people who don't identify as that. And it's broad, it's really broad. People identify sexually, gender-wise, and sexual identity is very diverse around the planet. So this work I'm not going to focus on, but I just wanted to say that I have touched on those questions that Susanna shares. And what I want to focus on more is this piece called Her Pleasure, Her Desire Remix. So before I show you a short video clip, I want to explain a little bit about what you're going to see so you understand the context. And it comes from those questions that Susanna and I are asking. So I'm just going to flip over to YouTube here for a moment. Okay, so what you're going to see is a technology-based artwork, an experiment on trying to find out if it's possible for people who identify as women to come together and explore what inner sexual experience or sexual pleasure is for ourselves through social media, and in the end through a technological artwork. And so the way I did this for my MFA at OCAD, and what I did is I invited people who identify as women to contribute audio and or video recordings of themselves masturbating. It was important that they did it when they're on their own and not around the influence, or to try to minimize influence that's around us all the time in mainstream, in pornography or sexual scenes in movies, even fairy tales, what that should look like. And so one of the things that some of the women said when they made this work, they contributed like footage, video footage or audio footage, was that they said, I didn't realize this, but I don't make any sounds. Or I never considered the fabrics that I'm putting on myself, how they feel, or their colors, or where I am, because those visuals affected the end result in the artwork, which I will play for you now. And so there's the software that's being used is Max MSP, and I collaborated with some people that I'll give credit to in a moment. And so it gets all mashed up in this software, and what you're going to see is purposely aniconic, meaning there is no recognizable imagery, because there is this danger of, again, falling into the pit of being objectified. And I mean, that's not necessarily a problem, but however, for the purpose of the artwork, I wanted to make it about, have people focus on the inner experience. So it's a kaleidoscope of the videos that gets mashed up, and then the audio itself also gets mashed up. Okay. Oh, it's not playing. Sorry. I don't know why it's not showing. So I should return to what I was doing earlier. Just a little bit, not too much. Yeah, that, you know what, that's actually better, sure, because you could see it better. Okay. So that's a mirror on the ground because I was projecting on the ceiling, and people have to lay down on this mat and use these interfaces to slightly mix the content of the work. So I'll let it play in the background while I share a little bit more. This work was inspired by sex-positive feminism's intent, but also sacred sexuality, which is very problematic, I think, in cultural appropriation or sex magic. A lot of people in the West are borrowing from a lot of tantrisms that have been part of sects and cults around the world, with very much understanding of what they originally meant. However, there's a whole other part to it. I don't practice Tantra or any what people call Tantra, but I am interested in how, for a lot of people who come from religious backgrounds, myself specifically from Catholicism, kind of like tie into it or find it helpful to let go of sexual repression, especially women, or people that identify as women, or non-conforming or queer or whatever. Because there's a lot of freedom and positivity around being exactly who you are as a whole. So anyway, I won't go into it too much, but the artwork was inspired by that work, curious about that whole arena. And I brought in a few of the interfaces, and if you wish you can try it. I'm going to pull up the artwork guts onto the computer right now. And I'll end with this, and I would love to hear from the audience some thoughts that you might have around Susanna's and my work, or our presentations. There's so much to share, as you can imagine, and it's a short amount of time. So this is, I promised to give the credit to the collaborators. And there were many, because it's, the work itself was done in conjunction with a lot of people, women, but also technologists. So I want to say that the women in this work are Adriana, the ones who decided they wanted to be public about it, Adriana Alarcon, Andrea Luxton, Augusta Shaw, Aurora King, Jess M.G., Mendy Henna, Patricia Silva, and technical collaborators Alan Major, Chris Rolfe, Maris Shabella, Brian McMillan, and Sean Martindale. There were a lot of people that made this possible. The women were from different races, different religions even, and different sexual orientations, including intersex, transgender, bisexual, lesbian, and it was across the board. So what I'm doing right now is I'm opening up the software and I'm activating the interfaces. Originally I wanted to put vibrators as the interfaces for the artwork, but because what my whole goal was for people to empathize with what women's sexual pleasure could be, but it became a little bit too narrow. My advisory committee suggested I don't do that, so we ended up with these soft interfaces, and all that's in them are these Wiimotes and the numbers that come from either tilting, rotating, or shaking these. Slightly manipulates the video and audio effects. So this is Max MSP, and I'm going to just start up the sound and visuals right now. Actually, I should put this audio back on. Oh, and I'm one of the contributors too, I should say, to the content. I think it's important to say it's scary, but it's also empowering. I'm an activist, and I say that as in, like, I actively like to meddle with my own psychological makeup for how it's been conditioned through society and also out in society as well. And I think it's very important to be honest. So what's happening here? It's not really working, but okay. You can see it with the small version. So this particular one, it desaturates and saturates the color, and if I shake it like this, it breaks up the kaleidoscope sections, and it also has some intensifying to the audio. Some of it is actually from the orgasm, though. I'm going to stop there. If anybody wants to try it later, they can. The thing that came out of making this work was that the women shared with me. They didn't necessarily know who each other were at the time, but they were saying that it was actually very empowering to be part of something like this, and a creative means of trying to play with what that desire and pleasure could be for themselves. And it's maybe a starting point, but I'm an optimist, and I believe that tools can be used in many ways. And so yes, it's dominated right now by heterosexual male porn, because we're still living in a patriarchal society, but that doesn't mean that tool only has to be used that way. So I'll end there.